If you're listening late at night, you might want to stay until the end. Something happened to me during my first week working the night shift at the morgue, and to this day I can't understand it. I was 26 when I took the job. Autopsy technician, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. a shift in Multnomah County at Oregon. They paid 40% more than the day shift, and I needed the money. Simple as that. I thought I could handle it. After all, they were just bodies. Just work. On the fourth night, around 1:30 in the morning, I was alone in the preparation room when I heard the freight elevator go up. The metallic sound echoed through the empty hallway. No one had warned me about any arrivals. I walked to the reception area. The air was thick, too cold even for the standards of that place. My breath formed thin clouds. The stretcher was there, covered with the standard gray sheet, but there was no documentation attached to the side. No label, no sealed envelope, nothing. I checked the computer, no login record. I called the security guard at the entrance. "Jerry, did you dispatch an ambulance a little while ago?" "No, it's been quiet here for 2 hours." I hung up. I looked at the stretcher. The sheet was perfectly stretched, the contours of the body visible underneath. Human, adult, thin. I pulled the stretcher into the preparation room. The wheels creaked in the silence. The hum of the refrigerators in the background seemed louder than usual. I put on gloves, grabbed my clipboard, and began the basic protocol: photograph, document, examine. I pulled the sheet away. He was a man, white. He looked about 40 years old, short brown hair, no beard. He was wearing a light blue dress shirt and dark trousers. No visible injuries, no signs of trauma. His skin had that characteristic waxy pallor, but something was wrong. The temperature. I touched the back of his hand with my fingertips. It was cold, of course, but not freezing, not like it should be. And it had a strange, almost damp texture, as if there were a thin layer of condensation. I took the usual photos: face, hands, full body. The camera clicked in silence. Each flash illuminated the white tiles of the walls, and for a second I saw my own shadow projected onto it. That's when I noticed the fingers. My right hand was relaxed, open, resting at my side. A natural position. I took the photo. I made a note. I turned to grab the measuring tape from the counter. When I looked again, the fingers were slightly closed. I stood there, staring, trying to remember exactly how I was before. Maybe I had bumped into the stretcher without realizing it. Maybe it was just rigor mortis starting, albeit belatedly. I adjusted my hand back to its original position. The skin was colder now, more rigid. I followed protocol. I measured, I documented, I looked for marks, tattoos, and scars. Nothing. The man had no identity. He had no name. He had no history. But while I was working, I felt something I had never felt before in that place. I felt that he knew I was there. 2:43 in the morning. I know the exact time because I started checking the clock obsessively. Each minute seemed to last longer than the last. The silence of the morgue at that hour wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a presence of its own, something that pressed on my eardrums and made my heart beat slower. I returned to the preparation room after trying, unsuccessfully, to find any record of that body in the system. Nothing. As if it had never been admitted. As if it had simply appeared. I decided to follow the protocol of the unidentified John Doe. Detailed photographs, fingerprint collection, DNA samples. Meticulous work. Work that kept me busy. That prevented me from thinking. I placed the ink pad and began with the fingerprints of my left hand. I pressed each finger against the paper with professional care, but my mind kept returning to that feeling, that irrational certainty that I wasn't alone there. I finished the left hand. I moved on to the right. The fingers were closed again, not lightly, not like before. They were clenched into fists, a loose fist, but a firm one. as if he had grasped something invisible while I looked the other way. My stomach clenched. I forced a deep breath. Rigor mortis, I repeated to myself. Just delayed rigor mortis. It happens. Bodies react post-mortem in strange ways. But I knew. I had left that hand open. I was absolutely certain. I gently spread my fingers. There was minimal resistance. I quickly took his fingerprints, trying not to look too closely at his face, trying not to notice how the shadows around the table seemed denser. 3:15. The room was colder, noticeably colder. My breath came out in thick puffs. I checked the thermostat on the wall. 16 to go. The same as always. But my fingers were numb even through my gloves. I went back to the body. I needed to do a full external examination before dawn. The director was arriving at 7 now, and I didn't want to have to explain why an undocumented body had spent the entire night without proper processing. I began examining the torso. That's when I saw it. A mark, purple, circular, on the right side of the neck, just below the jaw. I had photographed that neck 3 times. I had looked directly at that area under the bright light of the reflector. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. I leaned closer. The mark was recent, very recent. The color indicated hours, not days, as if someone had pressed their thumb there forcefully, letting the blood pool under the skin. But that was impossible. His heart wasn't beating. There was no circulation. There was no way for new bruises to form. I picked up the camera with trembling hands. I took 4 photos. The flash went off in the silence, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something in the reflection of the tile behind me. One form, high. Still, I spun around too fast. The chair hit the floor. My heart was pounding. Nothing. Just the empty room. The refrigerators humming. The body on the stretcher. But the smell had changed. It was no longer formaldehyde and chemicals. It was something organic, moist, like wet earth, like something that had been buried and unearthed. And then I heard it, very low, almost inaudible over the hum of the refrigerators. One breath, slow, deep, wet, coming off the stretcher. I should have left at that moment. I should have dropped everything, crossed that corridor, and gone down the stairs to the entrance. But I couldn't. My feet were stuck to the cold floor. My whole body was locked in that primal paralysis that precedes absolute panic. The breathing continued, slow, rhythmic, impossible. I forced myself to look at the body. His chest wasn't moving. His mouth remained closed. But the sound was there, filling the room, coming from somewhere between us. It's 4:22 in the morning. I reached out with a trembling hand and touched his neck where the purple mark had appeared. The skin was warm, not lukewarm. Warm. As if living blood circulated just below the surface. I recoiled so quickly that I dropped the instrument tray. The metallic clang shattered the silence. Scalpels, forceps, and scissors were scattered across the floor. That's when his eyes opened. Not completely, just a crack. Enough for me to see that they weren't the milky white of a corpse. They were functional eyes, moist. That followed me. My throat closed up. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just stared. And in that gaze, there was something beyond awareness. There was recognition. As if he knew exactly who I was. As if he had been waiting for me. I managed to move. 2 steps back. 3. My hand reached for the phone on the wall, but when I turned my head, I saw that the cord had been ripped off, hanging there. I hadn't heard anything. Nobody had come in. The body on the stretcher remained motionless, but the condensation around it had spread. Drops trickled down the stainless steel table. They formed puddles on the floor. And in that dampness, I began to see patterns, shapes, as if something were being written by the water. Deformed letters. Incomplete. Alone. My blood froze. I tried the door. I turned the doorknob violently. Locked. Impossible. That door didn't have an internal lock. It never had. It was a security protocol. The hum of the refrigerators stopped. Absolute silence. Only my accelerated breathing and that wet sound coming from the stretcher. I turned around slowly. The body had sat up. Not abruptly. Not like in the movies. It was a slow, deliberate, mechanical movement. The spine rising vertebra by vertebra. The head drooping forward. The arms hanging loosely at the sides of the body. And then he spoke. Not with my mouth. My mouth remained closed. But I heard the voice. Inside my head. Hoarse. Ancient. Desperate. You shouldn't be here. My legs gave way. I fell to my knees on the icy floor. Tears burned my eyes. It wasn't fear. It was something beyond that. It was the absolute certainty that I had crossed some boundary. That I had seen something that shouldn't be seen. They'll know you saw it. I closed my eyes tightly. I squeezed them so hard I saw stars exploding in the darkness. When I opened them again, the body was lying there. Exactly as before. Eyes closed. Motionless. Cold. The clock showed 5:47. The fluorescent lights flickered. They came back on. The door opened by itself with a soft click. I ran. I crossed the hallway. I stumbled down the stairs. Jerry found me in the hall. Startled. Dude, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't reply. I went back the next day to get my things. I resigned. Nobody questioned it. The director just nodded, as if he had expected it. Before leaving, I asked about the body, the John Doe who had arrived on my 4th night. He looked at me, confused. What body? We didn't have any admissions on Wednesday. It was the quietest night of the week. I showed him the photos on my camera. He leaned over to look. The screen was black. All the photos, erased, as if they had never existed. But in the last one, right in the corner, almost imperceptible in the darkness of the background, there was something. A tall silhouette, standing behind me, observing. I never worked nights again. I never went into a morgue again. But sometimes, in the early hours of the morning when I can't sleep, I still hear that breathing, that wet sound. And I know that wherever I am, somewhere in the darkness, that nameless body is still waiting. Because he said they would find out. And now you know too. Something happened to me. And to this day I can't understand it. My name is David. I've worked as a morgue technician at the Portland, Oregon Medical Examiner's Office for almost 8 years. I've seen it all. Charred bodies, drowned bodies, bodies decomposed to the point of being unrecognizable. I learned to switch off the emotional part, to treat each case like a scientific puzzle. Death didn't scare me. At least, not really. It was a Tuesday, late November. Night shift. The building is located in an isolated industrial area, far from the city center, surrounded by abandoned warehouses and empty parking lots. At night, the silence there is absolute. Only the hum of the freezers and the occasional creaking of the old pipes. I was alone. Marcus, the other technician, had called earlier saying he had the flu. Dr. Chen, the medical examiner in charge, trusted me for routine procedures. It's just a standard autopsy, David. Male, 40 years old, possible overdose. You can handle it yourself. At 11:15 p.m., I began to prepare. I put on my waterproof apron, gloves, and mask. The autopsy room is a sterile, white rectangle with floor-to-ceiling tiles and a stainless steel table in the center, bright fluorescent lights, normally. But that night, something went wrong. An electrical crackle. The lights flickered twice and went out. For 3 seconds, I was in total darkness. That kind of dense darkness, without a single point of reference. My heart raced. Then, the emergency lights came on. A dull amber glow from fixtures fixed in the corners. Enough to work. But the room now looked different. The shadows were longer. The equipment gleamed strangely. I took a deep breath. Just a partial blackout. The generator must have failed. The body was already on the table, covered by a green sheet. I picked up the file. Male, 41 years old, found in an apartment, no signs of external trauma. Estimated time of death, more than 12 hours prior. Body properly refrigerated. I removed the sheet. He was thin, pale-skinned, eyes closed, neutral expression. Nothing unusual. I positioned the instrument tray, turned on the portable recorder, case 1147, date, November 26th. Procedure started at 11:20 p.m. The room was too quiet. Without the usual hum of lights, every sound seemed amplified. The scraping of my gloves against the steel, my own breath muffled by the mask. I made the first incision, standard Y incision, skin, adipose tissue, muscle, all normal. But then I noticed something. The air was cold, colder than it should have been. My breath formed a thin mist, and there was a smell. It wasn't formaldehyde or decomposition. It was something metallic, almost electric. That's when I heard a low sound, rhythmic, continuous, one breath. I froze, scalpel in hand. I listened intently. It was coming from nearby, very nearby, but I was alone, and the body in front of me had been dead for more than half a day. I placed the scalpel back on the tray. My hands trembled slightly, something that never happened. 8 years in the profession, hundreds of autopsies, and I had never felt this. Primal fear, instinctive. Calm down, David. Think, I said aloud, just to break the silence. The sound continued, soft but unmistakable. A slow inhalation, a pause, a prolonged exhalation, rhythmic, like a biological metronome. I leaned over the body, bringing my ear close to his chest. His chest was motionless, completely still. I placed 2 fingers on his carotid artery, an automatic procedure, even knowing it was absurd. Nothing. No pulse. His skin was cold, stiff to the touch. Rigor mortis in its early stages, exactly as expected. But the breathing continued. I took a step back. It's the ventilation system. It has to be. I looked up. The air conditioning vents were still. No movement, no airflow. With the blackout, the system had shut down. So where was that sound coming from? I walked to the door of the room. I pressed the doorknob. Locked. Damn it. I tried again. Harder. Nothing. The electronic lock had jammed with the power outage. My cell phone was in my lab coat pocket, hanging on the other side of the room. I went to get it. No signal. Of course. The walls here were too thick. The breathing became heavier. I turned abruptly. The body remained in the same position, arms along the torso, head centered. But now I was absolutely certain. The sound was coming from the table. I approached again, slowly. The amber light from the emergency lights danced on the metallic surfaces. I observed every detail, the still chest, the parted lips, the closed eyelids. Nothing moved, but the sound was there, emanating from him as if his lungs were still functioning at some invisible frequency. I picked up the stethoscope. My hands were sweating inside my gloves. I placed the diaphragm over my sternum. I listened. Silence. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No heartbeat. No lung sounds. Death confirmed. But when I took the stethoscope out of my ears, there it was again. The breathing. Clear, close, real. That doesn't make sense. My voice came out trembling. Then I noticed something else. One of the fingers on my right hand was different. Before, all the fingers were aligned. Now, the index finger was slightly curved, as if it had contracted. Cadaveric spasm. I whispered to myself. It's normal. It happens. But my voice didn't sound convincing. I went back to the incision. Finish this quickly, David. Collect the samples, close the case, and get out of here. I took a deep breath, or tried to. The air seemed heavier now, dense, laden with something I couldn't name. I opened the thoracic cavity, ribs exposed, lungs visible, collapsed, without air, grayish color, typical of recent death, inactive organs, everything biologically dead. But the breathing wouldn't stop, and then I saw a muscle contraction, subtle, in the diaphragm, impossible. The body was dead, 12 hours, refrigerated, no circulation, no brain oxygenation, and yet something down there was pulsating. I felt a chill run down my spine. The room seemed smaller, the shadows closer. That's when the emergency light flashed, once, twice. And in that momentary darkness, I heard something else. A whisper, coming from the table. My whole body froze, every muscle, every thought. The whisper had been low, guttural, almost inaudible, but it was there. Words I couldn't make out, drawn out, as if they came from very far away. The light returned, faint, pulsating amber. I looked at the body. He remained motionless, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, just as he was. But now, there was something different in his expression. I can't quite explain it. It was as if his face had relaxed too much, or tensed too much, as if he were waiting. No, 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 no. I stepped back until I bumped into the counter behind me. Instruments clinked. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples, in my throat. I needed to leave. Immediately. I ripped off my gloves and threw them in the sink. I ran back to the door and started banging. Hey! Is anyone there? Security! My voice echoed down the empty hallway on the other side. Nothing. The building was deserted. I knew it. But logic no longer mattered. I banged harder. I kicked the base of the door. Open this damn door! Behind me, the breathing became deeper, slower, as if it were synchronizing with mine. I turned around. The body's chest was now rising and falling, slightly, but noticeably. This isn't happening. My voice came out as a strangled murmur. I had two options: to panic completely or to try to rationalize. I clung to my training. Post-mortem reflexes, gas trapped in the lungs, delayed muscle contraction. I repeated these words like a mantra, but even as I spoke, I knew I was lying to myself, because dead bodies don't whisper. I approached again, not out of courage, but because there was nowhere else to go. The room was too small. He stood between me and any possibility of a functional exit. I picked up the recorder, more out of habit than reason. 11:47 p.m. Observing abnormal involuntary movements. Possible. My voice faltered. His lips moved. Not much. Just enough for me to be sure I saw it. A slight tremor at the corner of the mouth. And then, the eyes. They didn't open, but under their eyelids, I saw movement. As if he were dreaming. As if he were looking around beneath that thin layer of skin. I dropped the recorder. It hit the floor with a dry crack. "You're dead," I said, and my voice sounded desperate. "You're fucking dead. 12 hours. No heartbeat. No brain activity. You're dead. Breathing stopped. For 5 seconds, the longest of my life, there was absolute silence. Then, a breath. Deep, slow, and with it, a noise in his throat. A wet gag, as if something was trying to rise up. I stepped back against the wall. I couldn't take my eyes off him. His pale skin seemed to shimmer in the emergency light. The veins in his neck grew darker, more visible. And then, I saw his fingers. All of them. Bending over, slowly, clenching into fists. There was no denying it anymore. There was no science that could explain it. It wasn't a spasm. It wasn't gas. It wasn't a reflex. It was deliberate. I screamed. A sharp, pathetic scream that tore at my throat. I ran to the opposite corner of the room, knocking over the tray of instruments. Scalpels and forceps scattered across the floor with a metallic thud. And then, the light went out completely. Total darkness. No amber. Nothing. Just me. And that breathing. And the sound of something moving on the steel table. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to make myself invisible. Hot tears streamed down my face. I could hear everything now. The dragging of something heavy. The creaking of the table. Footsteps. No, they weren't footsteps. It was something being dragged, slow, methodical, coming towards me. Something happened to me during a shift, and to this day, I look at the dead differently. I've worked as a technical assistant in a municipal hospital morgue for 8 years. 8 years watching bodies arrive on stretchers, filling out forms, organizing body bags in the cold storage. 8 years listening to the constant hum of the refrigeration system, smelling the pungent odor of formaldehyde mixed with industrial disinfectant. You get used to it, or at least that's what I thought. The night began like any other. A shift from 11 at night to 6 in the morning, alone in the basement ward. Dr. Pemberton had left around 10:30, leaving 3 newly arrived bodies to process in the morning. A traffic accident on Interstate 90. 2 men and a woman, declared dead at the scene. I was at my desk, typing reports, when I heard the first sound. A subtle dragging sound coming from the cold storage room. Nothing alarming. The ventilation system sometimes makes strange noises, pushing against the plastic curtains that separate the stretchers. I continued typing, but then I saw, through the thick glass of the chamber door, under the bluish light of the fluorescent tubes, one of the body bags moved. It wasn't a violent movement, it was subtle, as if something pressed against the black plastic from the inside out, slightly deforming the surface. A bulge that rose and fell. Then, nothing. I stopped typing. I stared intently at the door. My heart raced, but my mind quickly reasoned. Cadaveric gas. It happens. Bodies release gases during decomposition, causing spasms, involuntary movements. It's science. It's normal. I went back to the computer screen. 3 lines later, it happened again. And this time, it wasn't just 1 bag, it was 2. Simultaneous movements, small ripples in the plastic, as if hands were trying to find a way out. I rose slowly from my chair. The cold of the basement seemed more intense now. I walked to the chamber door and pressed my face against the glass. Vapor from my breath fogged the surface. I wiped it with the sleeve of my lab coat. Inside, everything was still. 3 black bags lay on rusty metal stretchers. Absolute silence. The fluorescent light flickered occasionally, creating shadows that danced on the white tiled walls. I wanted to believe I had imagined it. I wanted to go back to my desk, finish my shift, and go home. But something held me there, still, watching. And then, I saw it again. The middle sack. The area where the chest should be. It inflated, as if the body had taken a deep breath. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I opened the door to the cold storage room, and the icy air hit me like a solid wall. -5 degrees Celsius. My breath turned into a dense mist. The hum of the compressor inside was deafening, a deep, constant rumble that vibrated in my bones. I stood on the threshold, watching the 3 bags. No movement, no sound except the camera. The fluorescent light flickered twice, plunging the camera into semi-darkness for half a second before returning. I took 3 steps inside. The cement floor was damp, sticky beneath my boots. I approached the middle bag, the one I was sure I'd seen move. I placed my hand on the plastic. Cold, rigid, nothing. I checked the label attached to the zipper. Male, 34 years old, severe head trauma, reported at 6:47 p.m., dead for 8 hours. Impossible. I backed up to the door, keeping my eyes fixed on the bags. I went out. I locked the camera. I went back to my desk and picked up the phone. I dialed second-floor security. It rang 6 times. No one answered. Typical. Marcus was probably on patrol or sleeping in the break room. I hung up and looked at the clock on the wall, 1:12 a.m. There were still almost 5 hours to go. I tried to concentrate on the reports, but my eyes kept returning to the chamber door. The glass was fogged up again, but this time I hadn't touched it. The condensation was coming from inside. That's when I heard it. A clear sound. Unmistakable. Drag. Plastic rubbing against metal. Slow. Deliberate. As if something were moving inside the bags, adjusting its position. I got up again, faster this time. I ran to the door and pressed my face against the glass. The steam inside made it difficult to see, but I could still make out the silhouettes. 2 of the bags had been moved on the stretchers. Not much. Maybe 10, 15 centimeters. But you knew where they were before. I arranged those bodies. I placed them perfectly centered on the stretchers. Now they were displaced. Crooked. My hand trembled as I reached for the key in my pocket. I opened the door again. The cold cut through my skin. I stepped inside slowly, each step echoing in the icy silence. And that's when I heard the second sound. Breathing. No, it wasn't breathing. It was something similar. A muffled, rhythmic sound coming from inside one of the sacks, like air being forced through a narrow opening. Fsh, fsh, fsh. I froze in place. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. The sound stopped. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. Then it came from another bag. From the left side. The same pattern. Fsh, fsh, fsh. Then it stopped. And it started in the 3rd year. They were taking turns. As if they were communicating. My voice came out shaky, almost a whisper. This isn't happening. I took a step back, then another. My heel hit the door threshold. And then all 3 started at the same time. Fsh, fsh, fsh. 3 identical rhythms, synchronized. Muffled beats began to accompany them. Tum, tum, tum coming from inside the bags, as if hands were banging on the plastic from the inside, trying to find a way out. I ran out. I slammed the door of the chamber shut and turned the key in the lock. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the keys. I leaned my back against the hallway wall, trying to catch my breath. My mind was spinning. Corpse gas doesn't do this. Post-mortem spasms aren't coordinated. I picked up the phone again. I called security. Nothing. I called Dr. Pemberton. Voicemail. I looked at the door of the chamber. Through the fogged glass, I could see the silhouettes of the bags, and they were all facing me. I stood in the hallway, breathing deeply, trying to process what I was seeing. The 3 body bags, lined up, facing the door, facing me. I hadn't turned them over. Nobody had gone in there. I ran a hand over my face. Cold sweat mixed with the frigid air of the basement. I needed to get out of there. I grabbed my keys and walked quickly down the corridor towards the emergency exit. I turned the doorknob. Locked. Impossible. This door is never locked from the inside. It's against safety regulations. I shook the doorknob forcefully. Nothing. I clamped my fingers onto the cold metal and pulled. The door didn't budge an inch. My heart raced. I ran to the other exit, at the end of the opposite corridor. Same thing. Locked. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. No signal. Of course. Basement. Concrete walls. I was imprisoned. I returned to the main room. The only light on was in the cold storage room. The rest of the morgue was shrouded in darkness. The hum of the compressor was the only sound. Constant. Oppressive. I looked at the glass door. I needed to confirm. I needed to be sure my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. I approached slowly. The condensation on the glass was more intense now, running down in thick drops. I wiped the surface with the palm of my hand. My stomach turned to ice. The bags had moved again. Now they were closer to the door. The stretchers had wheels, but they were locked. I locked them myself before leaving. And then I saw something that took my breath away. One of the bags, the one on the right, was beginning to inflate. Slowly. As if something inside were filling the lungs. The plastic stretched, forming a dome in the chest area. Then it deflated. It rose again. It fell. Breathing. It wasn't gas. It wasn't a spasm. It was controlled breathing. Deep. Intentional. My hand gripped the doorknob, but I couldn't open it. I couldn't go back in there. The second bag started. Then the third, all inflating and deflating together, synchronized. I stepped back. I bumped into my desk. Papers fell to the floor, and that's when I heard it behind me, the sound of a zipper being opened. I turned slowly. In the corner of the room, near the stainless steel sink, was a stretcher I had forgotten about. A body that had arrived earlier, before the three from the accident, covered with a white sheet, not a body bag. The sheet was moving. Something beneath him was rising, slowly, the silhouette of a hand, stiff, curved fingers, pushing the fabric from the inside out. My voice came out in a whisper. "No, no!" The hand pushed harder. The sheet slid, and I saw a pale hand, purplish skin, dark veins visible beneath the surface, bluish nails. It moved. It wasn't a spasm. It was a slow, methodical movement, as if searching for something, feeling the air. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran. Anywhere. I went back into the hallway. The light flickered. Darkness for 2 seconds. When it came back on, I was breathless, leaning against the wall, tears streaming down my face. Silence. No sound coming from the camera, no movement. I waited, minutes that felt like hours. Then, the hallway light went out completely, and in the absolute darkness, I heard footsteps, slow, dragging, coming towards me. Blackout. I woke up in the parking lot, dawn light cutting my eyes. 6:20 in the morning. I was lying on the cold asphalt, next to my car. I didn't remember how I got out. I didn't remember anything after dark. I went back to work 3 days later. I quit my job the following week. But before leaving, I went back to the cold storage room. The 3 bags were still there, facing the door, exactly as I had seen them. No one had moved them. Something happened to me in the early morning of June 14th, and to this day I don't know if I wrote it or if someone wrote it for me. I work as a medical examiner at the Portland, Oregon Medical Examiner's Office, 3rd shift, from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. It's not glamorous like in the movies. It's cold, repetitive, and eternally smells of formaldehyde mixed with cheap industrial disinfectant. But I chose it. I prefer the dead to the living, They don't lie. They don't judge. They don't ask questions. That week, I was covering a colleague's shift, 72 hours straight. My third coffee was already cold when I looked at the clock, 5:40 in the morning. Almost done. I just had to review the reports typed during the night and file them in the system before going home. The computer was old. Windows XP, a flickering bluish screen, an internal fan making an annoying hum. I clicked on the pending reports folder. 3 files, all digitally signed by me. I recognized the first 2, overdose, traffic accident, simple cases. The third one. I stopped. Autopsy Thaigu 1000. Cause of death. Undetermined. The case number was wrong. No record starts with 5 zeros, and I didn't remember doing that autopsy. I opened the file. The text was mine, my writing style, my digital signature in the footer. But the content: female body, approximately 22 years old, pale skin, long brown hair, linear scar on the left forearm, 4 centimeter long, possibly self-inflicted. Tattoo of a blue butterfly on the right shoulder. Brown eyes. Open. My stomach churned. I hadn't performed that autopsy. I would have remembered. But that wasn't the worst part. The report continued describing standard anatomical details. Weight, height, rigor mortis. And then, it changed tone. During the examination, the coroner hesitated while handling the body. Trembling hands were observed. The examiner said in a low voice, "Sorry, I should have noticed sooner." I never write like that. Autopsy reports are objective, technical. They don't include what the medical examiner felt. I tried to close the file. The system crashed. The screen flickered. The cursor froze. And then the fluorescent light above me started flickering too. Fast, spasmodic, as if something were interfering with the electrical current. I stood up from my chair. I looked around. The office was empty, too quiet. Even the constant hum of the air conditioner seemed different, heavier, as if someone were breathing slowly, very close to my ear. I picked up the mouse. I forced the system to respond. I sent the printout for the report. The old printer creaked. It spat out a sheet of paper. I picked up the paper while it was still warm. I read the first line again, and that's when I realized the described characteristics: scar, tattoo, brown eyes. I recognized that body. My hands started to tremble. The light in the morgue, across the hall, flickered 3 times, and then it went dark. I stood there, holding that piece of paper, trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe I typed that without realizing it. Extreme exhaustion, sleep deprivation. I had already been awake for more than 60 hours. Maybe my brain was playing tricks on me. But those characteristics, I tried to push the thought away. It couldn't be. It was impossible. I grabbed my phone. I turned on the flashlight. The hallway light leading to the morgue was completely out now. The emergency backup should have kicked in, but it hadn't. Only the faint glow of my screen illuminated the path. I needed confirmation. I needed to see the physical records, the refrigerated drawers, the bodies that were actually there. I walked slowly down the hallway. The white tiles on the walls were cracked in places, stained with dampness. The smell of formaldehyde grew stronger with each step. My shoes echoed in the silence, a hollow, metallic sound, as if the entire building were empty. I arrived at the double doors of the morgue. I pushed them open. The icy air hit me immediately. -15 degrees Celsius. Always. The hum of the air conditioning system was on, but it sounded strange. Too rhythmic, almost like slow, deep breathing. I turned on the lights. Only half of them worked. The morgue was half lit, half in shadow. The stainless steel drawers gleamed faintly in the flickering light. There were 12 drawers. Only 3 were occupied. I knew exactly which ones. I had checked before going up to the office. but when I glanced through the drawers, one of them was slightly open, drawer number 7. Cold vapor escaped through the crack, snaking through the air like smoke. I hadn't opened that drawer. I was absolutely certain. My heart raced. I took a step forward, then another. The temperature seemed to drop even further. My breath came out in thick clouds. My fingers were numb. I stopped in front of drawer number 7. I placed my hand on the metal handle. It was freezing, almost burning. It was so cold. I pulled. The drawer slid smoothly. Empty, no body. No bag, just the polished steel surface, covered by a thin layer of ice. But there was something there. In the center of the drawer, on top of the frozen metal, was a folded piece of paper. I didn't want to touch it. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to get out of there, but my hand moved on its own. I picked up the paper. I unfolded it. It was a regular notebook page, handwritten, with my handwriting. "You know who I am." My stomach churned. I took a step back. The sheet of paper fell from my hand. I hadn't written that. I didn't. Then the lights flickered again, and when they returned, all the drawers were locked, except for number 7, which was now completely open. And there was something inside. Not a body. Not exactly. A shape. A silhouette beneath a stained white sheet. I hadn't put anything there. My breathing was rapid, shallow, and uncontrolled. The icy air burned my lungs. I took a step forward. My hand was trembling so much I could barely extend it. I touched the sheet. It was freezing, but not wet, not damp, just cold. Too cold. I held the end of the fabric, and I pulled. The sheet slipped, revealing nothing. The drawer was empty again, but when I lowered my eyes to the ground, the ticket that had fallen was different. Now there was a second line. "I never forgave you." The light went out completely, and in the absolute darkness, I heard steps, boards, coming towards me. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran toward the door, stumbling in the dark, my shoulder hitting the cold wall. My breath echoed in the silence, or perhaps it wasn't just mine. I pushed the double doors open forcefully. They swung open. I stepped out into the hallway. The office lights were still on, dim, but on. I ran over there. I locked the door behind me. I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. My hands were trembling. Cold sweat ran down my back, even with the air conditioning on. I grabbed my cell phone. I tried calling security. No signal. I tried the landline. Dead line. I was alone. I looked at the clock on the wall. 6:20 in the morning. Less than an hour until the shift ended, until the building opened, until people arrived. I just needed to wait. I sat in the chair. I tried to calm down, to find logic, an explanation. Severe sleep deprivation, auditory and visual hallucinations. This was possible. Documented. I was a doctor. I knew this. But the report, I looked at the computer screen. It was still open. It still showed the file. Autopsy, Delos 1000, cause of death, undetermined. I started reading again, slowly, every word, and that's when I saw it. Details that I had previously overlooked. Linear scar on the left forearm, 4 centimeters long. My sister had a scar like that. She cut herself in an accident when she was a teenager. Broken glass. She needed 6 stitches. A tattoo of a blue butterfly on the right shoulder. She had gotten that tattoo 2 months before she died. I had argued with her about it. I told her it was impulsive, immature, brown eyes, open. My sister died 8 years ago. Car accident. She was 22 years old. I never saw her body. I was doing my residency in another city. When I arrived, everything was already settled. The wake was closed. Cremation. My parents said it was for the best, that I should remember her as she was. But what if... My throat was dry, tight. What if I had view? What if, somehow, I had blocked that memory? I continued reading the report. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the mouse. Then I got to the final part, the part I hadn't read before. During the examination, the coroner showed signs of dissociation, repetitive verbalization. I should have realized. I should have been there. Psychiatric follow-up is recommended. My blood froze. Those words. I had thought about that. Many times. Over the last 8 years, I should have realized. I should have been there. She had called me the night of the accident. 3 times. I was studying. I didn't answer. If I had answered, the screen flickered, and a new line appeared in the report, a line that wasn't there before. The examiner shows signs of irreversible dissociation. They cannot distinguish between memory and projection. Immediate hospitalization is recommended. I stood up from the chair so quickly that it fell backward. That wasn't real. None of that was real. I tried the door, locked. I turned the key. It wouldn't open. The automatic security system, I had activated it myself at 11 o'clock at night. It only unlocks at 7. There were 20 minutes left. I looked around. The walls seemed closer, the ceiling lower, the air heavier. That's when I realized the reflection on the computer screen. Behind me, a silhouette. Stop. I will not come. I wasn't able to. I just stood there, staring at the distorted reflection on the dark screen. The silhouette didn't move. But I knew, in some deep and terrifying way, that it was watching me. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. When I opened it again, the silhouette was getting closer. My voice came out weak, broken. I know you're there. Silence. And then, whispered so softly I could barely hear, I've always been. I turned off the monitor with a sudden movement, and I stayed there, in the dark, waiting for dawn, knowing that, even when the sun rose, she would never leave. Something happened to me, and to this day, I can't understand it. I work as a necropsy technician at the Portland, Oregon Medical Examiner's Office, night shift. 7 years doing this. You learn to switch off. You learn that the body is just matter. You learn that death isn't scary, it's just the end. But there's a place in there that was never just that. Chamber 3. It's located at the end of Corridor B, past the autopsy rooms, isolated. Technically, it's the same as the others. Heavy steel door, temperature controlled, metal shelves, but nobody uses it at night. Officially, a ventilation system failure. Unofficially, nobody talks much about it. I heard it from the veterans. Mike, who worked here for 15 years before requesting a transfer, once told me, "Don't go into Chamber 3 alone after 2 a.m., Lucas, no matter what they ask you to do." I laughed. I thought it was a rookie joke. He didn't smile back. "You're going to hear things, and it won't be an echo. It won't be tiredness. It will be within from your head." I never took it seriously. Until that night. It was a Tuesday in February. Harsh winter. Wind pounding against the ventilation grates like something trying to get in. I was alone on shift. The other technician had called in sick. 3 bodies arrived from an accident on I-5. 2 went straight to Chamber 1. The third, there was no room. "Take it to Chamber 3, the supervisor said over the radio, already leaving. I hesitated. "Are you sure? The ventilation system, it's working. Just use it." And he hung up. I stood in the hallway. The body was on the stretcher, covered by a white sheet. A man, in his 50s. No visible trauma. Cardiac arrest. Probably. Corridor B is long. Fluorescent lights flicker. White tiles reflect everything. Every step of the stretcher echoed. When I arrived at Chamber 3, my hand hesitated on the doorknob. I had never gone in there alone. There was always someone with me. Always during the day. I turned the latch. The door opened with a clunk metallic. The cold hit me before I even went inside. It wasn't just the temperature. It was denso aze, if the air were waiting. I pushed the stretcher inside. The sound of the wheels on the floor echoed differently, more muffled. The metal shelves gleamed under the single light on the ceiling. 3 bodies were already there, covered. I lifted the body from the stretcher and placed it on the middle shelf. That's when I heard a whisper. It didn't come from outside, vineyard within. I stopped mid-movement. The body was on the shelf. My hand was still gripping the edge of the sheet, and the whispering continued. They weren't words, not yet. It was like breathing, but not my own. It came from somewhere between my ears, as if someone were speaking, from me. I looked around. The room was empty. The door was closed behind me. 3 bodies on the shelves, motionless, covered. Exhaustion, I said aloud, just to hear my own voice. But it sounded strange. Too muffled. As if the air swallowed the sound before it traveled far. I took a step towards the door. The whisper became clearer. You know. I froze it. My heart started beating faster. My breath became visible in the icy air. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Silence. I was almost at the door when I heard it again. You know what you did. This time, it was clear. A voice. Hoarse. Neutral. Genderless. Without emotional tone. And it was inside my head. My hand trembled as I gripped the doorknob. I turned it. I pushed. The door didn't open. I tried again. Nothing. I looked at the lock. Nothing was blocking it. It didn't make sense. You can't leave yet. My stomach churned. I started sweating even in the cold. I knocked on the door. Anyone there? Hey! Nothing. Just the distant hum of the freezers and that voice. I rested my forehead against the cold metal of the door. I took a deep breath. I tried to think rationally. Pressure, exhaustion, lack of sleep. Maybe a gas leak. Maybe. She's still waiting. My blood ran cold. I knew who she was. I turned slowly. The shelves were as before. 3 bodies, covered. But now, something was different. The sheet I had just put on the body was moving. It wasn't wind. There was no wind inside. It was as if something was breathing beneath him. I didn't want to look, but my eyes wouldn't look away. The sheet slipped, just a little, enough for me to see. One hand, pale, long fingers, dark nails, and she moved, slowly, as if trying to get out. I screamed. I punched the door. I kicked. I yelled, and then she stopped. The sheet fell back down. The voice whispered one last time, "You will come back." The door opened. I fell out. I hit the hallway floor. My shoulder hit the tile. I looked back. The room was empty. Silent. Normal. But the cold had gone out with me. I got up from the ground and ran away. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached the break room. I locked the door. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I stayed there until my shift ended. At 6 in the morning, the supervisor arrived. She asked if everything was all right. I lied. I said yes. I went home. I took a hot shower. I slept all day. But when I woke up, the voice was still there. Not all the time, only sometimes. In moments of silence, when I was alone, You know. In the car, at the supermarket, in bed, before going to sleep, always the same voice, always the same tone, always of within. I tried to ignore it. I tried to rationalize it. I saw a doctor. He said it was post-traumatic stress. He prescribed antidepressants. It was no use, because the voice was not a hallucination. She knew things. 3 days later, I was driving when I heard, "The blue car is going to brake." 2 seconds later, the Honda Civic in front of me braked suddenly. I almost crashed. 1 week later, at home, "Your sister will call in 15 seconds. 15 seconds later, my phone rang. It was her. I started writing it down. Every time the voice said something, every time it proved to be real. And then I noticed the pattern. She only talked about things that were about to happen. Small things, details, but always correct. Until the night she said, "She's behind you." I was in the kitchen, alone. It was almost midnight. I turned slowly. Nothing. But I felt it. That cold. The same cold as in Chamber 3. And for a second, just a second, I saw a silhouette standing in the hallway. Just an outline, no face, no defined shape. I blinked. It disappeared. But the feeling remained. I went back to the morgue the next day. I needed to know. I went to Chamber 3. I opened the door. I went in. It was empty. Cold. Normal. But when I looked at the middle shelf where I had placed that body, I saw something. Scratches on the metal, as if someone had tried to get out, of within. I picked up the report on that body. Man, 53 years old, cardiac arrest. But there was one observation at the end. Found alone at home. Neighbors reported that he had been talking to himself for the past few weeks. He said he was hearing voices. My stomach sank. I know what just happened. He heard it, just like me, and he couldn't get out. And now, I carry this. The voice is still here, every day, quiet, waiting. And I know, that one day she will take me back to Chamber 3. Because what goes in there never fully comes out. You only take one thing with you, and that something eventually pulls you back. If you work the night shift, tell me where. And if you've ever been through something similar, you already know what to do.